everyone, Jorhena Thomas here with another session of I Didn't Know That Was a Job. Today, we have a real treat. We're here with Angie Gad, who has a fascinating background, and she's going to tell us a little bit about it. Hi, Angie.
Hi, Jorhena. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, so Angie is an intelligence analyst by training. And so right now, she works at the intersection of intelligence analysis, teaching, and starting a business. You don't hear that every day, right? So let's learn a little bit more from Angie. So, Angie, tell us about what you have done and what you do now.
Thanks. So I have been in the intelligence and counterterrorism space for well over a decade now. I've worked in government, focusing on counterterrorism and kind of on the granular level, kind of focusing on ISIS and far right extremists for a big chunk of beginning of my career. Then went into academia, started teaching intelligence and counterterrorism, national security, went back into the private sector, and then kind of focused more on extremism. Um, and I've worked in so many different spaces. I've done government, private sector, academia, tech startups. And then I got to a point where I decided to start my own business. And because I love intelligence and I love teaching so much, I decided to begin training the future generation of analysts.
Excellent, excellent. And not a lot of people do that, which is why we're happy to be able to talk with you. So you've done government work, you've worked in the private sector for companies and in the corporate space, you teach, you train, and that is fascinating. So before we go any further, just for those who are not super aware, what is intelligence and intelligence analysis? Like, can you give us a quick blurb so we have a good starting point?
Yeah, so intelligence or intelligence analysis is essentially the process of taking information or data that's collected and then converting that into actionable intelligence. So kind of using your training as an analyst to um, understand kind of or make sense of the threat landscape or provide your decision makers or clients or policymakers with decision advantage and clarity on how to proceed or what kind of the current threat landscape is so that they're able to understand the nature of the threat and how to address it.
That is a great definition. Thank you. Okay, good. So now we all know what intelligence is. So what is unique about your work? What would you say?
So I think what's unique is that traditionally, even when I talk to analysts or teach analysts in different universities, I think intelligence seems to be or has been confined in this secret or clandestine space, or that you can only do intelligence if you're in the government, and it's kind of always been synonymous with that. But I think what's unique about it is that, and even I kind of going in thought that as well, but throughout my career, I realized intelligence applies to government work, it applies to the private sector because tons of companies need intelligence to kind of, whether it's physical security, executive protection, figuring out kind of the threat landscape for, it looks differently for every different company. You need students need to learn intelligence in academic settings, and then the future generation of analysts need to know how to do intelligence, how to kind of apply or learn analytical skills to their day-to-day job. And that has been what's unique about intelligence and my career so far, is that taking that intel and kind of applying it to so many different fields and sectors in the various industries.
Yes, thank you. And I think that's such a revelation for a lot of people because you're right. For so long, it's been synonymous with secret government work. But really, intelligence is like one of those things that's kind of very practical, right? You need someone to look at the what's going on, make sense of it for you, and help you make decisions. So thank you. Okay, so talk to us, Angie, about like some struggles you might have had when you were getting into the field and were trying to find your way.
Yeah, so my story is a little bit unique. Going into starting off in counterterrorism, I was a very young analyst going in. My background is Arab American and I'm Muslim. So as you can imagine, going in and working in counterterrorism, and covering jihadist groups, that gave my family and my community some pause, given the fractured nature of the relationship between the Muslim community in America and the government post 9/11. So I had to deal with a lot of kind of balancing both making sure my family understood that what I was doing was honorable work, and at the same time, positively representing the Muslim community and Arab Americans internally in government when kind of our main focus were jihadists and Muslim Americans who were kind of going radicalizing and becoming extremists, um, and kind of changing the perspective of individuals who are, not coming from my background and kind of having them understand like, hey, we're not all the same, and there are kind of good Muslims, and I don't like to kind of use that label, but you understand what I'm saying. So, and that put, a big burden on myself. It was a self-imposed burden that I put on myself kind of as a very young analyst coming into the space.
I feel like that tells us something about you and the type of personality that you have, that you would put yourself in that position to follow this career path, knowing that personally, it may have been a hazardous situation in terms of the perspectives that people had.
Yeah.
Now, I want to ask you about like how you navigated yourself, and then any points where you had to pivot and do things that maybe you weren't expecting to do in your career, and then how you got to having your own company.
Yeah. So navigating it, I mean, navigating that was a little bit hard. I think I eventually got to the point where this is not my burden to carry. And I did as much as I could. And I think I did made some good contacts and helped kind of change people's perspectives on Muslims. But then kind of moving past that and getting into kind of, I had a couple life changes at some point, and I was like, okay, I had to leave government. I had to figure out how can I apply Intel to other spaces. And I figured out that, again, it's applicable to so many different spaces. And that's where I forced myself to kind of get out of that. And then I was like, wow, I could teach Intel. I don't have to just do it in government. And then that was one point where I had to pivot. And then more recently, I wanted to kind of manage my own team and run my own Intel shop. And that meant doing less analysis and doing more managing and more training. So I pivoted from being an analyst to then running my own shop of 15 analysts. And I loved it. It was so rewarding. I got to train them. I got to kind of deal with things that I never dealt with before when I was just focusing on neo-Nazis or ISIS. And then from there, I had another life change, and I got to a point where I spent some time reflecting on what my next step would be. And I realized that my two passions are intelligence and teaching. And then I decided, okay, how can I, take those two passions and merge them? And I started my own company, and I said, okay, I really am passionate about this, and I want to start training the future generation of analysts, and help them hone their analytical skills and then apply that in their respective fields.
Well, Angie, you are a trailblazer. And for those of us who have Intel backgrounds like I do, I really admire what you've done and how you navigated yourself and taken those opportunities to pivot and pivot again to get to where you want to be. And so thank you for doing that and for helping to set the next generation up for success and seeing what's possible. So thank you for spending this time with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.